Every year, Startup Grind hosts our SGWomen Leaders Month, proudly recognizing the accomplishments of successful women leaders all over the world. These women are founders, venture capitalists, engineers, executives, educators, and more who represent our community all around the world. This month's SGWomen Month is proudly presented by Google for Startups and Silicon Valley Bank.
Have a 40-year track record of doing this in the US, where 50% of venture capital-backed companies are our clients. We are probably most well known for providing venture debt finance to startups, but ultimately the bank's split on two. So on one side, we have our VC funds, of which we bank about 3,000 globally and can provide fund finance facilities to. And then on the other side, we have our fast growth technology and life science companies. And for these companies, we offer financial and banking services to help support their businesses as they go through the typical fundraising journey. And then beyond banking, we also leverage our connections within the ecosystem to offer opportunities to connect with investors, customers, and talent in order to help our clients grow. And we do that in Europe and then also in the US. And on behalf of SUB, we are so thrilled to be a co-partner of SGWomen Month. And what a fantastic way to shine a spotlight on the achievements of women across the tech, investor, and startup industries. And on behalf of SUB, we are so thrilled to be a co-partner of SGWomen Month. And what a fantastic way to shine a spotlight on the achievements of women across the tech, investor, and startup industries. At SVB, we understand that there is a lot more that needs to be done across the sector regarding equality, and also recognize how much more this ecosystem could benefit from a diversity of opinions and ideas. I'm really looking forward to learning from our panel today and hearing their views on the challenges that women face, how they've personally overcome them, and ultimately found success in what are largely male-dominated industries. So on that note, I believe I'm passing it back to either Katie or Denise.
You are indeed. Thank you so much, Claire. I think you nailed it. That was amazing. Thank you for partnering. And on that note, I just quickly like to say thank you to our local sponsors, also Abacus Gibraltar, who's been supporting us from the beginning. But to actually give a little bit of a welcome on Gibraltar's behalf, we have somebody who's a bit of a special person in Gibraltar. The Minister for Gaming, Digital and Financial Services, Albert Isola, is with us. So please go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, wherever you are, everybody. It's a real privilege to be here in a get-together between the Isle of Man and Gibraltar, two small territories that have so much in common and so many friends in common and so many themes in common. Gaming, fintech are two that we'll be discussing today. And I'm especially pleased to be here with you all. Micky, Mrs. Diversity, who I've known for some years and hosted the E-Summit in Gibraltar with KPMG for many years. Valli, who's actually here with us permanently, and it's very nice to see you here too. And of course, Karen from local firm Xapo, who are here with us in Gibraltar, and Angela, who we haven't met before, but it's a privilege to be with some amazing women who are going to be talking to us today about how you can inspire many others to follow you in the very difficult and challenging sectors in which you work. And I also have to thank Derek for being with us today and for starting this whole thing off some years back with Startup Grind. I think a fabulous idea. I remember when Denise first came to see me to talk about what Startup Grind does and what they wanted to do. It was a pretty easy sell. I think we signed up within about 5 minutes and said, we'll support you, tell me what you need, and we're there for you. So a huge thank you to you for having the idea to set this platform up and to help so many startups in understanding what business is and how they can get better involved. I also have to congratulate Denise, who from the Gibraltar perspective has done a quite incredible job. I mean, Paul mentioned to me that you won Rookie of the Year in your first year as a chapter, and last year won the Chapter of the Year, first woman ever to have done it. So I'm not surprised, I've got to be honest, and a huge congratulations to you and a thank you. The trust that we placed in you some time back was very well placed, and I'm grateful to you for the work that you do. I think for me to talk to you about inspiring women in the company that we're with today would be a little bit ironic and perhaps misguided, so I won't even fall for the temptation. But I would say that in the 21st century, that we should still be talking about this, I find a little disappointing. And people like you will tell us in the next hour or so what we need to do to allow more to have the opportunity that you've had and to have the courage and conviction to take that opportunity up. I strongly believe life is about opportunity. And only this morning I was interviewed by a journalist here on The Rock who was explaining to me how difficult she found it to get into journalism. And it's really disappointing in a place like Gib to see that those things still happen today. And when you look at all the different challenges that you face in some very male-dominated worlds, insurance is an enormous one. Tech also, gaming less so, I suspect now. It is credit to you all to have got to where you've got to, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say. In terms of what Gibraltar does, as many of you know, we've done an awful lot of work in the last 25 years in the gaming space. Quality over quantity, we've got very few firms, but they still today represent 75 to 80% of the UK gaming business online. It's a huge number for such a small territory. And we've done that by properly regulating, by having high standards, and being very strong gatekeepers. We don't want people here who don't care about the reputation, who aren't prepared to meet the standards that we set. So that for us is important. Same for the Isle of Man. We're talking about small territories that want to protect and preserve their reputation. We're also very strong in fintech. We were the first jurisdiction to implement blockchain DLT legal framework. That's going really well. Xapo, who are with you on the panel today, exactly the same as in gaming. We really want to partner up with really good, strong quality firms, which we will develop a long-term sustainable relationship with the stakeholders in our jurisdiction. So what we are doing is very much about cutting edge of technology, which is very much, I guess, some of the subjects we'll be talking about this evening, quality and education. One of the big groups of the university is education in responsible gambling, education in fintech, digital schools. We've also supported, which I know Denise has also, Girls in Tech, which we've been very strong supporters. My colleague, the Minister for Equality, Samantha Sacramento, is a big supporter of Girls in Tech. So in all the areas that you hope that I hope you will talk about, we are big fans and big supporters of, and it really is a pleasure for me to be with you this evening and to listen to you. And really the only one thing I'd like to say is happy birthday, Micky, from last week. I'm sorry I missed it last Thursday. So we're having a belated diversity birthday party for you. So thank you for having me with you, and I'm privileged and honored to be with you. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. So I think we are going to have a quick intro of who is on the panel today, although we have made sure that we have made so much noise about this incredible panel. Micky Swindale, you're the CEO of KPMG Islands Group. Angela Vandenberg is a solicitor by profession and also the chair of Love Tech. Valli Fragoso is the founder and CEO of Cobovec, and Neov is Global Employer Branding and Communications at Xapo. So we have people connecting, very diverse, people connecting from all over the world. Thank you all for joining us. But I really want to give a massive thank you to the person who's going to chair the conversation, and that is the person behind the magic that happens at Startup Grind. Founder Derek Andersen, who's also the co-founder and CEO of Belly.com. So enjoy your session, and we will reconnect in about an hour. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you so much for that introduction and for everyone's participation, from Albert and also SVP and the entire team. Special shout out to the organizing team to put this together, Denise and Katie and Margaret and Alex, who have come together and who really inspire our entire global community with 600 chapters around the world. connecting people and entrepreneurs, people that want to help each other, people that want to give before they take, and people that are in need of making friends and want to make friends. Those are our values. And so I am grateful to be with to be interviewing and running the questions with these four amazing women. As we kind of get into this, we also would encourage you to, any questions that you have, to ask them below, and we will be getting to those shortly. We have this incredibly geographically diverse group representing literally people and places from across the world. And I think I'd love to just begin. I know the sort of the key message here is about learning how we can learn from these inspiring women, how to inspire more women and inspire more change and gender diversity. But I'd like to just begin speaking and asking you all about the racial protests and the sort of the things that we've been seeing around the world. Obviously, this has been sort of started in the United States and heavily in the United States, and we've seen it across Europe, and we've seen it in other places, sort of support, and down in the Pacific and other places, really trying to change and to improve the world for people of color, specifically people in the Black community here in the United States, of what we can do to sort of undo some of the wrongs that have been done and to really truly make this world an equal place and a fair place. And I'd like to, maybe I could just start, Karen, you're in Atlanta. Maybe
Yes.
We could start with you and love to get your perspective on this of just, inside of your industry, inside of your company, what has been the conversation with you all about and your own thoughts around, what we can do as leaders and what we can do as people in positions of privilege to actually be part of the change that needs to come from this.
Oh gosh, it's such an interesting question, Derek. So I'm here in Atlanta, and it's definitely been a place that's been very active. We've had days of protests, and I think the first thing that we all need to do is kind of recognize what our own privilege is. So really taking a step back and saying, is it good enough that I don't consider myself, racist, but we have to actively be what we're calling anti-racist now, right? So actually standing up and speaking up when we see, people saying things that maybe are a little off, or they're not recognizing their bias or discrimination, and helping to educate and keep that top of mind. I think particularly for myself, because I'm an HR professional, it's something that I've always been very hyper aware of, particularly from a recruiting and hiring perspective. I always try to train my teams about being aware of their bias and being able to tackle that, so that we don't have these invisible barriers that exist for women and particularly for people of color. And like I said, the first thing is recognizing that even exists. So just keeping that dialogue very open and in the light.
Thank you, Valli. Love to have your thoughts as well. What if you've seen this happening across the world? What's been your perspective?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Sorry. Go, Valli.
Was it Valli?
Apologies.
Yeah, let's go, Valli, and then Micky. Go ahead.
Okay. So I was just going to say that people need to respect each other, no matter what they are, where they are from, what color they are from. If people realize that they treat the other person as a human being and nothing else, these differences will come down. We, rightly, like Karen said, we have to educate everybody around us. We educate our kids about it all the time. We educate our employees about it all the time. But it's utmost importance that everybody has that in their conscience, that everybody is a human being and they have their own circumstances, they have their own life, and you are nobody to judge in any possible way. So if people realize that, I think things will change eventually. They have come quite far from a long time ago. I come from India, and I know how bad it is in general. There used to be castes and sex, etc. So it's just different now already. We just have to keep working at it, and people will eventually realize what happens and how things have to change and how to respect each other. Thank you.
Yeah, it's something I'm very mindful of, having grown up in Nigeria in a very multicultural society, a very multicultural education system. And now in my role across the KPMG Islands Group, covering, from the Isle of Man through Malta and then through into the Caribbean. And quite often our staff, when I go and visit the firms, will say, we hear you talk about gender diversity a lot, but actually, what about all the other aspects of diversity? And I'm always very quick to acknowledge that gender is only one aspect of this. It's easier in some ways because it's easy to measure. We know what the balance should be. There are 50% men and 50% women. So, our target is an easy one. But all diversity, the business benefits that come with diversity, quite aside from the ethical benefits, come from all aspects of diversity. And there are endless statistics to show us that. And it was interesting in the Sunday Times this weekend, this big article saying Black Lives Matter, except for in the boardroom, and looking at the statistics, which are woeful.
Angela, anything you want to add, and then we'll keep going.
Sure. Yeah. So absolutely, it's the fact that it's still happening and that protests need to happen in this day and age is mind-boggling. So it is so important that we need to educate ourselves, those of us that sit in a position of privilege, to be aware of our unconscious bias and to continue talking about it constantly, and to allow people that that find themselves in a position where they are being discriminated against, that they are able to talk about it and not feel that they will be attacked for doing so. And as leaders, we need to be able to create that safe environment in the environments that we are in.
Yeah, I said I have 2 little girls and 2 little boys, and I sat down with the 3 of them, and we watched some of these videos of the brutality, police brutality, and some of these, these injustices have been happening. And these are hard things to discuss, but I think, I know I am super grateful for my parents who, taught us very early on that racism was not something that was ever going to be acceptable in our home and in our lives. And, people that had those persuasions or opinions were not people we were going to give time to and support. And so but we've seen it, this incredibly diverse group of people here, all across the world. This is not an American problem. This is a global problem. And I've seen it in every country I've lived in 3 or 4 countries and 3 or 4 states. And I've seen it in every place I've lived. I've seen some form of racism. But appreciate all that you all shared here, and want to transition to really talking about how the incredible things you all have done specifically around supporting women. First, Micky, I'd love to start with you, and how talk to us about how gender diversity has changed over the last 10 years there, and what's gotten better, what's gotten harder, or maybe it's all better, or maybe it's all worse. I know it's not worse because you've made some incredible progress. So could you tell us just sort of what that change has looked like?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely has got better. You're absolutely right, Derek. But it's got better pretty slowly, and it's still getting better pretty slowly. And I think that's the kind of overriding message. I guess personally, I first started talking about gender diversity quite by accident in 2016, because we ran a post e-gaming summit round table. And to be honest, I was struggling for a topic. So I decided to get together a group of senior women from the Isle of Man gaming sector. And I was pretty shocked at what I heard, and it kind of grew from there that we were having a conversation around diversity. And I suspect for me, there was a little bit of it that was around the time that I was appointed partner. So I kind of felt okay and entitled to talk about it because it no longer served me, if you know what I mean. And I think there's been a huge change since then. And I'll talk perhaps a little bit later on about the change specific to gaming. And if we look, you know, in the UK at the FTSE 100 and the FTSE 350, we are up to around a third women on the executive boards, but it has been very slow coming, and it's going to be very slow to grow from there.
Valli, love for you to jump in. And how have you seen things change over the last 5 or 10 years, you know, for better or worse?
I have to agree with Micky. It's been quite slow, and it's been quite difficult as well for many women out there to actually get into those executive rooms and executive roles to be able to perform what they do today. But we are seeing the change. You know, in the past, women would accept, not all of them, but yeah, most of them would accept their fate, and you know, they would say, "Oh, it's my fate. I would just stay here." But it's not the case anymore. Everybody knows it, you know, what needs to be done, or they at least give it a try. They fight for it. They are out there trying to achieve what everybody else in terms of male gender has achieved. 50 years ago, obviously, we didn't see any fighter pilots who were women. These days, we do see fighter pilots in women. So things have changed, but again, like Micky says, it's going to take a long time. It's going to take a long time to actually get that gender equality. And for me, I think diversity is something, again, has to be in everybody's mind, in their thought process, not necessarily just because you look at somebody say, oh, there's 5 women here or 10 women, you know, 10 men there. It's more about how you think, who's got the talent, who's coming in, who can actually deliver this properly. If that mindset comes through into everybody's mind, I think things will get better. It's a slow process. We can't change that. We can't just change things overnight in general. This is one of them as well, I think.
Yeah, I think we're seeing more women, you know, graduating from college, from, you know, pursuing higher education, particularly technical degrees. So the talent pool is growing, but then it's that question of inclusion. How do we keep them engaged in industry, and how do we grow them, and how do we get them to that top level? So, you know, we need to make sure that we have the right policies in place that, you know, allow for women to, you know, have things like maternity leave, to know that their job is protected, to have a flexible work environment. I can tell you myself, on a personal note, I'm 8 months pregnant right now with my first child, and that would be abundantly clear if we were in person, but you can't tell necessarily. But it's something that's been really on my mind, and, you know, it's hard. It's really hard physically, emotionally, mentally, and I have all sorts of questions, and I really want to know that I'm protected, and that when I, you know, come back, I can pick up. I won't have that gap in my career, and honestly, I think it's going to make me a stronger professional, because again, this is hard. So I really feel like it's that inclusion aspect and building pathways for women to advance within industry.
Yeah, and Angela, would love for you to share some of your thoughts around this. I mean, it's one of the biggest issues is around getting young women into STEM and sort of improving the education system. And we've seen different countries trying different things. In the United States, we've seen different states trying different things.
Yeah.
How can the education sector encourage more girls to pursue STEM careers?
Well, STEM fields are often viewed as very masculine, and teachers and parents often underestimate young girls' abilities in STEM subjects, in maths, starting as early as preschool. And we do find that young girls actually become systematically steered away from STEM subjects at school, pursuing those sorts of careers. So what we need to do, we need to encourage and develop skills and confidence in young girls to succeed in STEM. And we can do this by improving STEM education and support for girls at a very young age. This can be done in a few ways. You can provide professional education to teachers to address that implicit systemic biases to encourage girls and women to take maths and science classes. Because there are no innate cognitive biological differences between men and women's brains. Girls are just as capable of pursuing maths and science careers as boys are. And we need to break that unconscious bias that's not the case. Another important thing I would say is to change how classes are taught by connecting STEM experiences to girls' lives, promoting active hands-on learning and emphasizing ways STEM is collaborative and community-orientated. Because that's a lot of us as women, that's how we think. We engage with the world in a different way to men do. And STEM sometimes seems a bit more standoffish from being community oriented. So if we can educate and show that actually STEM subjects and careers are very much community orientated, and if we can get stuck in that way, it would encourage girls a little bit more. We need to educate girls, teachers and parents directly that math skills are innate and are learned, and they change over time. So this promotes a growth mindset. You can't say, I'm bad at maths. That's not true. You can learn to be it. If you put the work in and have the drive to do it, you can absolutely do it. Also need to increase awareness of higher education and career opportunities in STEM. What cool jobs are out there that you didn't know about before? For example, if you are a passionate writer, that doesn't mean you can't be the script writer for the games, computer games. If you're an artist, get involved in the art in those sorts of computer games. If you love cooking and food, you could consider being a flavor chemist and design and develop flavors for crisps. There are so many things that could be of interest to girls that they don't know about, and increasing that awareness is very important. And another thing which is really, really important to me is to emphasize strong and visible role models in STEM. Because half of the problem is that there are not enough visible women in these sorts of roles that little girls can look to and be inspired by. So STEM mentorship of women is very, very important in education.
There's so many great thoughts in there. Just on that last one, would love to just go down the list. Who is somebody that, and let's start with Angela. We can go back to you quickly, and then Karen, Valli, and Micky. Who is a woman that has inspired you in your career? Is maybe, and when you say these inspiring women, are these mentors that we need to know? Or are these just people that we need to see out in the field? I would love to just hear somebody that has inspired each of you.
You want to start with me?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Of course, being a solicitor, so sort of in the legal field, a woman that inspired me so much was Ruth Bader Ginsburg, actually, an incredible and inspiring woman who I think so much of, and was a great inspiration for me to pursue the career that I'm in. But on a more local level, we have some here at LoveTech, some incredible local women who work in STEM, who serve, as we hope, a source of inspiration for the young girls on the island here. One of which is a local molecular biologist, Rachel Glover, who has been so instrumental in helping the Isle of Man government with the COVID testing as well. And we're so proud to have her on board as a STEM mentor, as a scientist, and she's quite visible here on the Isle of Man. So she's very important in our world too.
I have one that is always very obvious for me. I had a boss back when I was working in sports media, another male-dominated field, but I was working in sports media, and I worked under a director, her name was Chris Seal, and she was incredibly inspiring to me. She ran this entire department, which was probably 85% men, and just to see her in that role and the way in which she led and empowered really stood out to me. And she also had a way of showing me what I was capable of that I didn't necessarily have the confidence yet to recognize. So, you know, she chose me to work as a camera operator during our football season, and that was very rare. I was the only woman out there, and not only that, but you know, I just stuck out like a sore thumb. I was 5 feet tall and amongst all these giant white men. So it was quite a funny sight, but she said, hey, I think you can do this. I want you to do it. And I had no second thoughts. I was like, if Chris believes in me, I can do it. And so it's really powerful to not only see it and be inspired by it, but to have that empowerment and someone telling you that you admire so much that you're capable.
Good one. From my side, I had my mother, who was quite an independent woman. She had quite a few difficulties when she grew up. She didn't have parents when she grew up, actually. So she learned everything by herself, and she always told me that you have to be independent. You can't depend on anybody, because that person may or may not be with you for a long time. So that's kind of driven me quite a bit. So I kind of take her to be my role model. She's no more at the moment, but I've had quite a few like that in my career as well. I had this manager at GBC who I worked with. She's still working with me at the moment. In a way, we're quite good friends now, and she's always encouraged me to do what's right. So there's quite a few like that. But at the same time, I think it also has to come from you know, a school as well, the teachers that you learn with, the curriculum that you go with. If there is an introduction of software development or math or technology into the curriculum at some early stage, not necessarily just right before you get into college. For example, in Gibraltar, we don't have any summer camps where we can actually teach our kids software. I had to look up, for my son, I had to look up for a summer crash course in London. So things like that, if we make them available within the community, there are so many heroes within our community. Nurses, there's firefighters, women, who can come into school, who will be the role models. You introduce them at a much early age to the kids. I think they will do really well. They understand. I was discussing this with somebody just a few weeks ago, and I said to them, there's not enough introduction of acting to the kids. My 8-year-old says he wants to be a YouTuber because that's what he watches most of the time. When they get to school, if we are actually able to have those arrangements in school where kids go, oh, I met a nurse today, this is what she does. I met a doctor today, this is what he does. Or, you know, somebody else. There's so many real life jobs which the kids are not aware about. So I think that's what needs to be instilled in their minds from a very young age. They understand, okay, this is what I like. Because you come to a stage, I have a teenager kid who's in university now, and he had trouble trying to figure out what he wants to do. So, you know, these are the things that we can actually help them with from a much earlier stage, try to give them opportunities to meet different people, different places. They can come to schools, they can also, looking at the curriculum itself, there's many subjects which are not clearly explained to the kids from an early stage, or there's no combination of subjects you can choose when you go to the university. These are some of the things I think need to be addressed from an education system perspective as well. If you're taking statistics, you can't take math or you know, computer science or something else. That kind of open combination should be available for students from school days, not necessarily from university onwards, because they are available in university, but not from school days. So if we look at those things, I think we have a bigger opportunity to introduce our kids to a much better life, rather than, or younger generation in this case, from a much early stage of their education, rather than later in the university when they're already teenagers and they're confused what to do and what to take. Thank you.
I thought Angela's observations were, I am going to come back to who my inspiration was, by the way, I promise. Particularly as I know my mother is watching this, so She'll be sitting there with her arms folded thinking she better say me. But coming back to that, I mean, the points Angela was making around girls and STEM subjects at school, and I think, you know, her points were absolutely right. But there's also a question, I think, around the bias that even as girls and boys participate in STEM subjects at schools, the inherent bias that they face. And when I've been talking about diversity and inclusion over the past couple of years, I focused quite heavily on the statistics around business benefits, because I think that's quite persuasive, particularly when you're speaking to an audience who maybe don't see the problem. And the other thing I've tried to do is focus on some really interesting research. And one of those pieces was that a study where primary school teachers graded maths tests with no names on them. And when they did that, the girls outperformed the boys. But when they gave the same tests with the names on them to another group of primary school teachers, then the results were reversed and the teachers gave higher grades to the boys than the girls. And of course, as is often the case at primary schools, all of those teachers were female. But nevertheless, that bias sort of fell into what they were doing. And I mean, we've heard so many examples at the different diversity presentations we've had at our e-summit over the years. Lydia Barbara gave some amazing examples about how gender bias creeps into coding, creeps into AI. And so there's that huge battle that you're facing there as well. But that's not the question you asked me, I know. So in terms of inspiring women, yes, Mum, absolutely you. But also, given that Angela got the notorious RBG, who's always been a huge inspiration for me, I think I would go for Melanie Richards, who's our deputy chair in the UK, because she was one of the founding members of the 30% Club. She's on the steering committee of the Hampton-Alexander Review. And a couple of years ago, she was voted a shiro, if that's the word, by the FT for everything that she's done to promote gender diversity in the workplace, not just at KPMG, but right across the FTSE 100. But to be honest, that's not why I mention her. I mention her because she's been so personally supportive to me and has mentored me in a way that's just been transformational for me. And I think that's actually the key, isn't it? You know, if I look in my life, whether it's in Gibraltar, whether it's in my family, whether it's here in the Isle of Man, I'm surrounded by this army of women who shore me up and support me and inspire me and encourage me. And I think that's the thing that's really kind of, you know, transformational.
Thank you for all of those thoughts. And I mean, you know, my mom's watching too, my hero as well, my inspiration. Valli, you put us on a tough spot there. No, it was really well said, and she sounds like an incredible person. Micky, I know you've had a lot of success on actually specific numbers around getting 54% of your workforce are women, quarter of your leadership team are women. Maybe you could talk about some specific things of just tactical things that your company did, and specifically in the, we know you're in a big company, so most of us sort of startup people probably don't have all of the tools that you have, but maybe you could share some tactical things that you did to accomplish that, and anyone else that would like to jump in and share some sort of tactical things that they've done to increase women inside of their companies as well.
Well, I do think being a role model and talking a lot about the topic, I mean, my board must be sick of the subject because I talk to them about it so much. But I think it is really important to be airing it, to talk to our younger women as they come up, because frankly, we're far from perfect. Yes, you're right that, you know, probably in terms of the women that join KPMG, we're usually well over 50%, and right up to kind of manager, senior manager level, we stay at that sort of percentage mix with about 50–55% women. But it does really then quite dramatically drop off until you get to partner level, and worldwide, you know, I would say we're between 20 and 25% female partners. So there is, you know, we still have a long way to go. We have got much better at, I think, at opening our minds about how inclusive we're being. But I'm still shocked occasionally when I go to conferences or key events at KPMG when I see there's a hell of a lot of men in the room and not so many women. So I just think you've just got to keep pushing the envelope.
Great. Anybody else have any tactical things they could share or suggestions for people running businesses and trying to figure out how to get better at this?
I think it just needs to push for all the female colleagues that we have in the industry, or wherever you work with, or your friends. It's basically how women negotiate themselves, in terms of job, as opposed to men do. From my experience, at least, or in my point of view, let's say. I think that's where we need to coach them quite a bit to promote themselves. Because what I normally have found is women do work hard, same as anybody else. But at the same time, they don't promote themselves enough to get to the stage where everybody else gets. I think that's an important key. Everybody has to learn and implement. They have joined a job, have a keen eye to everything, etc. But at the same time, try and talk about yourself, promote yourself. Don't bore the other person, but at the same time, try and talk about what you can offer in terms of work. What is it that you're good at? If you find yourself not really confident about something, go speak to somebody. I'm sure there's quite a few managers in the companies who are happy to help. We haven't, all of us, we haven't been able to come here without somebody's help. There's always somebody that needs to give you that push. So I think women have to take that initiative by themselves and then go and ask for help. We have a saying in India, we say, don't ask for it, your mom won't give you food either. So it's funny in my language, but it's but that's what it is. You go ask people for it, and then they will help you. If they can't help you, at least you will get some sort of direction from them, telling you, okay, maybe I don't know much about this, but you could try talk to this person or some other person. I think that's quite important. That way you improve your network of people. You try talking to people, they will be aware that you're interested in doing something. And at the same time, you probably might end up in a better situation where you learn something, you get an opportunity for it, and you move forward. If you just sit there, complain, or just moan about it, it's not going to happen. Nobody will know. So I think that's important. That's key for all women or men. Anybody who's in a job and wants to progress, they have to show to the other person that they are interested.
Yes, I absolutely agree. Women don't engage in self-advocacy for themselves nearly as much as they advocate for others. And it's a lot about that lack of confidence in their own ability and their skills. And it's a generalization, but often women will never ask for something or approach something or go for an opportunity unless they feel they are fully qualified for it or deserve it. So whereas a man would say, you know what, I think I have enough to get by and I'll learn on the job. So whereas a woman won't take that first step. And you were touching on mentorship as well, being so important. So, approaching and having the right mentor that can encourage you, through that process, give you that confidence, building up your network, introducing you to people that you wouldn't have had exposure to before, and to engage with organizational leadership to let them know that you want a leadership role. They're not going to give it to you unless you ask for it or approach it. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and it's okay to make mistakes as well. I mean, many times people are afraid, what if I do something wrong, and what if I get fired? It's okay to make mistakes. Not every mistake is punishable. And that's how you learn them. So I think that's quite important for people to accept that it's okay to make mistakes. We all do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that concept too. And someone told me a few years back, the way they said it to me, they said, you are the CEO of your own career. And that really stuck with me. It's like, you know, you're the one in charge. You need to know what you want. You need to know what your strengths are. You need to know, how to find those advocates internally and show your value. So I think that's really important. And another point I want to make is just along the topic of, you know, unconscious bias and overcoming that and kind of reframing what the C-suite should look like, or people in these other positions. So there was, and one thing in particular I want to bring up is this kind of idea of like coded phrases, and this is coming from my recruitment background. So I would often have female candidates come in, and I started seeing this pattern in the interview evaluation feedback where they would say, you know, everything looks good, but then we would get to this idea of executive presence. And I didn't know what that meant, but it was a common fallback of, you know, looks great, great background, lacks executive presence. I was like, well, what does that mean? Well, it means I wouldn't really quite feel comfortable putting her in front of, you know, XYZ person. And I'm like, well, you know, if executive presence to you means what the C-suite looks like to you traditionally, you know, older white men who look a certain way, act a certain way, talk a certain way, then yes, she's not going to have that. So you need to challenge your leaders and really make them be more objective in their requirements and really define what it is they're trying to evaluate so that women have a fighting chance at those jobs. Because if they're just going to be hiding behind these coded words like executive presence or culture fit that don't really mean anything, then we're screwed. And we all have these biases. I want to share one more story, just because to show that I myself, you know, have been in this situation, and I consider myself a woman of color. But early in my career, I learned a lesson from an African American woman that I worked with. I came back from an interview and she said, well, tell me about the candidate you just met. And I said, oh, she was really good. Like, her portfolio was great. She was articulate. And she looks at me and goes, was she African American? I was like, well, yeah, how did you know that? And she said, well, you said she's articulate. You wouldn't have said that if she wasn't African American. And I was like, oh my God, I had no idea. Like, I didn't know that was a coded word. I didn't know that was a bias that I might have held. But then I started to see that pattern too. And it was always with women of color. They are articulate. You wouldn't point it out with a white man. I never saw that. So it's a constant learning process. But again, just look out for those little patterns that might end up, you know, be people hiding behind their biases and discriminating unconsciously.
Yeah, and I would feel, you know, I come at this from a slightly different angle because, you know, I think you're right, you know, stereotypically there are differences between men and women, and there are very clear differences, as all three of you pointed out, between how women particularly conduct themselves in interview situations or how they approach promotion opportunities and so on. And we often encourage women to, you know, try and change that and don't let it hold them back. But actually, I would say it's the responsibility of the organization to learn that different people approach those situations in different ways and to feed that into how they recruit or how they promote. Because otherwise we get in danger of saying that we want to fix women, that we want to make them more like men. And we're not going to get any of the benefits of diversity if we do make women more like men. So it's a really difficult one, isn't it? And I often remind my colleagues that typically, and it's not going to apply in every case, but I often remind them that if they go into an interview situation and they have an equally qualified woman and man, then the man will sell himself and the woman will be forensically self-analytical about what she can and can't do, and may even spend more of her time telling you what she can't do. So yes, of course, we've got to be aware of that. But you know, the thing I say to the boards that I deal with across KPMG, which are still largely white and male, is that you may find that when the first few women come through into your board, that they don't fit in all that comfortably. And not fitting in comfortably is precisely the point. the reason it all feels so great now is because you all have similar views, similar values, you reach decisions very easily, and it all feels, you know, hunky-dory. But are you making commercially sound, well tested out decisions? Almost certainly not without any other viewpoints in the room.
Yeah, that's a great point. That there's there's all these things around just being easy, you know, and just doing sort of, you know, you just sort of, it's easy to hire somebody who already has this, you know, experience inside of technology or had these opportunities before, and you're just sort of going off of what somebody else said. You know, it's hard to take a risk on somebody who, you know, I've been looking at dozens and dozens of resumes of people outside of tech in the Black community over the last few weeks, trying to figure out how we can really get better at this, you know, help this community. And there are just so many incredible people who are not in technology or who haven't had a chance in technology, who just on paper, it's going to be harder versus the person that did 3 years at LinkedIn, you know. And so we've got to you know, find ways to, but when you speak with these people or you meet with them, they're equally as qualified and maybe more qualified because they have a more interesting and diverse background. I wanted to share one thing. Is that in a startup, like in the beginning, you kind of will take anybody who like will, you know, who will work with you, right? Like you just, I mean, honestly, anybody, like if they can talk and if they, you know, can send emails, like they're in, they're you know, they become a critical part of your company. And I think for me, as somebody that, you know, not trying to be mean about the people that joined my companies early, but you know, I know for us, as we looked at this specific issue in adding women inside of our startup, I'm speaking about Bevy and not Startup Grind, we were women were wildly underrepresented inside the company. And about a year ago, we looked at this and we said, there's so much more we can do. We made a really conscious effort. We had some really hard conversations internally that, as somebody mentioned, like, you know, it wasn't things that anybody was getting fired over, but it was just things that, you know, we needed to do better on. And since that time, you know, we have hired in the last year, since last September when we had those conversations, we've hired 12 women, we've hired 6 men, which gets our percentage inside of the company to about 46% women inside the company. I am embarrassed to say that in terms of people of color, we are wildly underrepresented of that as well. And so now this is a new thing that we need to just hit head on and have tough conversations trying to get better at. But I think as I've been somebody that has sort of seen and been on both sides of this, and Startup Grind is, our HQ team is really overrepresented by women, which is incredible and not really normal for technology. You know, I think it's just something you've got to, once you start to get going and you can kind of like you're not drowning in work anymore, you have to work on it from the very beginning. You have to consciously go out and you have to, you know, try to get people of all different persuasions and diverse types of people inside the company. And it's especially early on when you have so many problems and you have so many fires, it's something that's really critical. One of our first employees is a woman named Carly Krieger, and she's our CMO still today, 7 years later. And she changed our company. Without her, Startup Grind would not be what it is today. And I'm so grateful that she took the leap and joined with us. And we're going to wrap to questions here in just a second. So if you have more questions, please post them. I'm gonna go around. Love to start with Valli on this, and then once we kind of cycle through, we can jump to the audience questions for the last 15 minutes. And that is, what can startups do to better entice and support and get women inside their companies? Thinking of smaller companies, thinking of companies with limited resources, like, you know, what can we do, knowing all of the problems that we face and the troubles and difficulties that we face? What, like, if you're put yourself in a startup founder's shoes, how can they solve this problem inside of their little company?
I think I'm in those shoes at the moment, so
right.
I'll try and fit them properly. So I think it's important to look at women who have been on maternity leave, and women who are finding it difficult to come back, but have great talents in them. Giving opportunities to such people would also not only benefit you because they have that happiness that they are being recognized as people with talent, and then come back to work for somebody. I think this is one of the challenges that still exists in the industry, although we have great things like maternity leave for 1 year, paid, half paid, etc. But many of them are still losing jobs because of this. And kind of bringing them in, especially given now we realized with the pandemic that everybody can work from home. I think it's one of the advantages we have to us, that we can let them come in part-time work, still take care of their family, etc. These opportunities would probably give a little bit more confidence to women to actually come back into work and start again, because kids happen, and then obviously once they are 3 or 4 years old and when they're going to school, then they don't have anything else to do. They are just at home and bored, and this is when we have the leverage to actually take them into the job and help them out. So I think those are some of the options we have. We also need to encourage women to come and give a try to a different role, which is still based on their previous experiences, not necessarily stick to one. I've seen many people stay in the same job for a very long time, different reasons. I'm not here to say that they're wrong, but I would point out that sometimes you get comfortable in a job if you're there for many, many years, and you try not to develop yourself. When you stop developing yourself, you lose confidence. And that's where I think companies also need to come in. I was quite one of the lucky ones who actually had the opportunity at UBC, because I went in and I asked for training for something, and I did get it eventually. Sometimes it might take time, but I did get it. So companies also have to invest in their employees and say, okay, I know you've been in this job for a long, long time. How would you like this? Or how would you like that? It's quite important, not necessarily just for women, but also for men. You have men who have been in the companies for 16, 17, 18 years. They just get comfortable in it. I think that's quite important. You keep up with the trends. You keep yourself appraised with the industry changes, what's going on. If the company also assists the employees in that area, I think it'll be a great collaboration between an employee and an employer. And it gives everybody more confidence to hire as well as to job. Thanks, Derek.
Thank you. Anyone else want to jump in and share?
I think having, oh, go ahead.
Sorry, Karen, go for it.
Sure, I was just going to say, I think having that top-down support is huge. I've worked in companies where, it was more just an HR initiative, or it was tagged as an HR initiative. And then I've worked in companies where, the C-level or CEO, this is true of Xapo, our CEO, Wences Casares, is very passionate about this, is the one who's really driving the diversity and inclusion initiatives. And having that support at that level really helps, because it sets the tone for the whole company. And I think you could even go a level farther as to, tying this diversity and inclusion goals to your OKRs, your objectives and key results, and tying it to performance of your management team and holding them accountable. I think, that's really important, and will really motivate people to get it done. And then, of course, along with everything Valli said in terms of creating that inclusive environment that really retains women for the long term.
Absolutely, and promoting a welcoming environment for women is so important, which would include pay equity, very important. Flexibility, strong family and medical leave policies, inclusion and anti-bias training for management is really important. Mentorship and networking opportunities, which is an important thing for women as well. And anti-discrimination and anti-harassment policies also give women comfort.
Yeah, and I think that the maternity leave point is a really important one that Valli made, because whilst I don't have children myself, you know, I think we do lose a lot of, or fail to get back a lot of women. And I mean, you know, if I look back at some of the research we did back at the time that we were starting founding the 30% Club, we were looking at some of the myths about women, and they interviewed a number of women who had come back to the workplace about their experiences of how having that time out, or having that break with their family affected them. And I think they summed it up as it was like a pit stop in a Grand Prix, and they felt that they came back with just so much greater skills of empathy, multitasking, you know, being able to deal with a whole wealth of things. But if we don't make it easy to come back, then we lose this incredible array of talent. And I mean, one of the examples that I've seen in recent years where it's been done really well within our organization was KPMG in Malta, where the senior partner was really concerned about the fact that he was losing women between sort of senior manager and going to partner. And so, and it's very unusual in our profession to have part-time people at partner level. And he said, no, it's fine. It's fine for the female partners to be part-time. They can be as low as a 30%, you know, timeshare. And he started that probably 5 years ago, and it worked really well. The number of female partners, or the percentage of female partners we have in KPMG Malta, is way higher than across the group as a whole. And he got a challenge from one of his male partners a number of years ago, who said, I'd kind of like to go, you know, I've got young children, I'd like to go to 30% as well. And he said, I'm really sorry, I just can't allow everyone to do it. And it's not you I have problems retaining, it's the women. So.
Well done, well done.
Great. Maybe from there we'll jump to questions. Denise,
Sure.
Take it away.
Yeah, okay, so we've been getting lots of questions. One of the first questions we have is from Paul Estengo, and he's asking, what is the single thing that any person of any gender could personally do to ensure that we balance the inequality? Shall we
So I think it's about
Yeah.
educating yourself. You know, educating yourself about the realities. I mean, there was a really interesting quote in the Hampton Alexander Review this year, where they talked about, and it was quite a strong thing to say. I'll just read it out. It says, men in large numbers need to find their voice and join the current conversation. Until men can understand and articulate the complex and compounding barriers that women face, the gaps, and how to fix them, they will, oh, I can't read it now. They will remain adrift from the debate and the solution.
Yeah, I think it was really powerful also to start the conversation with what currently has been going on. I think we don't address things until they actually become such a huge problem that we just can't stare them in the face anymore. And I think that probably is part of the problem too. I think we have to be able to identify where we need to do better before it gets to an issue of the kind we're seeing at the moment in the US. But anyway, back to what we are back to. Catherine Morgan is asking, how important do you think it is for women to have mentors? Would you like to take that, Angela?
Oh, yes, massively, massively important. So I cannot emphasize enough, any woman who wants to pursue a career, and particularly if they want to pursue a leadership role, is to find the right mentor within your organization. Someone who's going to encourage you to build up your skills, someone who's going to build up your confidence, someone who's going to get you into a network that you need to get those connections, and someone who will advocate on your behalf or encourage you to self-advocate. And it's massively important for women because we don't self-advocate. So if you can get someone on your side and high up it's great if it's a woman, but men too, as Micky was saying, men need to be part of the solution as well. So don't be afraid to approach a male mentor within your organization at all.
Fantastic. So I'm going to put this question to Karen. What are the key issues for any business to address, but also to attract and retain female talent?
Gosh, so yeah, I think it's a lot of some of the points we've been through already, just in terms of addressing unconscious biases, having the right policies in place, having fair recruitment policies, being very open about what you have to offer can certainly help with that attraction, and making yourself an advocate in this space, attending events like this and sponsoring events like this, actually having an active voice in the community, I think really helps. So I think those are some of the main points I would say.
Thank you. Valli, so there is Christina Jufrey from Girls in Tech. Thank you for joining. There's a great quote, she says, "We rise by lifting others." Could you share an example in your career where you helped another woman rise or someone helped you? Specifically keen to understand how we help more women rise to leadership and board positions.
Definitely. I had somebody who helped me, and it was a woman as well. When I was working at GVC, she used to be my manager, and she has coached me quite nicely. And today I'm here. You can see the example yourself. So I think it's important for everybody to understand and not literally jump to conclusions when you're looking at someone and if they have done a mistake or if they have done something. Coaching itself at workplace is quite important. I have had teams whom I coached, both men and women equally. I didn't have to choose whether I had to coach women or men, because at different levels in your career, you would find people grasping things faster or slower, and it's not based on men or women. You have to coach both of them at the same time. So I think it's basically you having that mentality to be able to share to the person after you, because I have noticed in many cases in the past that people don't generally keep themselves open to coaching somebody else because they're afraid that they're going to lose their job. But you also have to remember that if you don't coach somebody, you will be stuck in that job for a long time. So you can't move on forward. So you have to coach somebody to take your position so you can take a step forward. I think that's quite important to remember. Thank
you, Valli. So let's go to Angela with this one. It's from Roberta Castle in Isle of Man. What is your one piece of advice to your 18-year-old self?
Oh my goodness. If I could talk to my 18-year-old self, I would say that you are entitled to be here. You have every right to ask for the things in life, and you deserve them, and you must work for them. Don't hold yourself back. That's what I would give. That's the advice I would give.
It's good advice. So, Micky, you mentioned before about that there needs to be more pushing of the envelope. Do you have any practical examples of how we could push the envelope? I mean, I do events, so I hear you where you're coming from in terms of the inequality, especially in the corporate space of these events. I have managed, luckily in Gibraltar, to be able to have almost 50-50 mix of audience, but it only happened after the first year. And I think that was because I have always tried to mix speakers with joining men and women. I've never had segregated conversations where it's just women and just men, which is one of the reasons we invited Derek to chair and Albert to intro, because I think men have to be a part of the conversation. So that's one practical example, but I'd like to hear from you what you feel could be more practical examples of pushing those envelopes.
I do think the conferences, you know, as public events are really important. I've been really mindful of this in all of the summits that we've had in Gibraltar, Malta, and the Isle of Man over the years, of the importance of having, well, you know, they talk about manels, don't they? All male panels, you know, the importance of avoiding that and having female speakers and really trying to make sure that people see a representative, diverse mix of people on the stage. And I'll be honest, you know, it isn't always easy. I mean, I was quite impressed. One of my fellow partners in the Cayman Islands, he organizes a huge, it's called CASE, it's the Cayman Islands Alternative Investment Summit each year. And he made the commitment, I think it was last year, he said, from now on, our speaker and panelist lineups will be 50-50. There will be at least 50% women. You know, so he publicly went out there and set himself that target. And by doing that, I think you make it clear how important that is. And I think there's other things you can do. I mean, I talked about the example in KPMG Malta, but we talked a little bit about mentoring. And mentoring, just as it has for Angela and Valli, it's been very important to me over the years. But in light of my advanced age, inevitably, most of my mentors have been men, because actually there weren't that many senior women around when I was younger in my career. And those men have definitely been the kind of man ambassadors that I was talking about. And I don't mind admitting that Albert Isler has been one of them. You know, when I came down to Gibraltar as sort of thrown into KPMG as MD, then actually the amount of support I got from the local business community to thrive in that role really made a big difference. So, you know, I think that mentoring aspect is really important, but reverse mentoring is something that I haven't. I mean, you know, maybe I would say they got some reverse mentoring benefits from the support they gave me. But I think active reverse mentoring schemes can have a really big impact. And I know for KPMG in the UK, their reverse mentoring scheme, which has been operating for 2 years now, which is about pairing partners in the firm with Black heritage colleagues, so that people at senior levels could truly understand the challenges that those from diverse backgrounds faced as they came into our workplace and tried to progress successfully up through our workplace. That's been transformational in terms of the understanding that those senior leaders now have of the realities of day-to-day life.
Yeah, that's interesting actually, because I find that I've had very important male mentors in my life as well. And I think it's actually unconscious mentoring to a certain point, where they just, and I think Albert did it very well today as well in sharing you know, all the stories behind how all of this came about. It is a support system for me personally that encourages me to keep going and to keep trying to achieve things in my professional life. And I'm not sure that is something that he's aware that he's doing, but it's very much so, and it's very necessary. So I'm going to go to Valli, and I'm going to ask you about, actually no, I'm going to go to Karen. Sorry, we're going to just ask the last two questions, and then I think we're going to have to wrap up, just because time has gone on and we're just having so much fun. So Karen, do you think women need more confidence professionally and in the boardroom? I know we touched on this previously, but how can we achieve that confidence that men sort of naturally have to apply to that, you know, job that they don't have all the skills for, and so on?
Oh, it's a tough question. Yes, we could all use a little bit more confidence, right? I mean, I think it's something that we're always growing and working on. I think self-confidence is a practice. You know, it's never set. And I think as you gain experience, as you gain wins, as you educate yourself, as you strengthen your relationships, your confidence gains over time. And you know, we're also talking about, you know, that role of the mentor and those people that really lift you up and show you what you're capable of, that maybe you didn't even think you were, that give you, you know, that confidence to try it out and see that you can do it. So I think, you know, it's something that's practiced and built, but it's also something that other people can actively participate to help grow you. so mentors, but also companies. So I think it shouldn't just be on the woman to say, you know, I'm going to look at this like a man would look at this job description. You know, why don't the companies say, I recognize that, you know, this sort of discrepancy exists, and I'm going to make my basic qualifications much, you know, more accurate. What are the absolutes that they need for this role, and then everything else I'm going to actually put as preferred, because I know that's actually an ideal candidate, and I may not get it, and I can train someone in that, and that's okay. Those are the things I would suggest.
Cool. Thank you so much. Valli, I know we didn't get to talk about this too much, but you have done a lot for kids yourself personally and through your startup, disadvantaged kids actually. So why do you think it's important to invest in young people, and tell us a little bit about that?
Young people have innocent minds and clear minds. It's more or less like a blank slate. What you write on them from a young age is what they would think of themselves. And it's quite important that we actually build confidence in them, direct them in the right direction, and you know, kind of show them a path. You don't have to specify which path they have to choose. They will choose it eventually, but you just have to make those paths available to them. I think that's quite important. For me, working with kids has always been a big thing, because obviously coming from India and, you know, seeing poverty and all that there, it's always been a sad part that'll stay. I would say if I have any Indian colleagues here, ex-colleagues here who are listening into it, they would understand what I'm talking about, because there you have kids who probably don't have parents, who probably don't have food to eat. We are blessed here on the Western side of the world, where you know, many parents are able to provide. So for me, it's quite important. They are vulnerable. They don't know what to do. They're confused. And a small smile, a little smile, and a lot of help would actually bring their courage, their confidence, their dream come true. So for me, it's quite important. I did work with street children when I was in India, when I was in university. For some time, I used to go and train them in different things. Working on the Synergize app at the moment is a big thing for me, because I was really actually happy to jump up at the opportunity to do it. So thank you to Nicole and yourself for even bringing that to me. So I think it's the direction that we can show them. We're talking about adults. We're talking about people who already are in jobs, who have careers, who have made up their mind to some extent. And we are comparing that with kids who have not made up their mind, who don't know what to do, who have probably fears. For me, it's something that we can help with, and it's utmost important, because they are our future generation. And if they're not there, where are we next? That's my point. Thank you.
So I have one more question for Angela that came in quite early on, and I don't want to miss it. So why do you think women are not as visible in STEM?
Why do you think, sorry, please repeat
women
that?
are not visible in STEM? It's one of the audience's questions.
Yes, I think because of the unconscious bias that STEM jobs and careers are more tailored towards men. And there is, even from a very, very young age, women and girls are almost discouraged from pursuing those sorts of careers and subjects. Micky was talking earlier about the teachers in school who are women, and they themselves have a fear of mathematics, so tend to push that onto girls themselves, and will push boys more in that way. So until such time as we can create awareness that boys and girls are just as capable as one another to pursue these sorts of careers, and you know, encourage them to be aware of the cool jobs that are out there, that it's not going to change. So that's why Love Tech and various initiatives around the world are pushing this, because it's so important now.
Thank you. There is a question about communicating differently. They were interested in knowing the panel's thoughts on how women engage and communicate differently, and how, for example, you would handle a bully in a work situation. I don't know if any of you want to take the question on. Please go ahead.
Okay, I'll give it a go. Sorry, you were going to say something?
No, go ahead.
Okay. No, I think communication and bullying and being clear about different genders at work is more to do with, you know, respecting each other. I know I touched this topic earlier when Derek asked us about you know, the ongoing unrest about the Black people, etc. But I think it boils down to the fact that when you look at your peer or your colleague, or whoever it might be, if you don't have that respect in your mind for that particular person, you tend to show that aggression in some way or the other. It may have to, you know, it may be bullying, it may be something else. You probably will dump most of the work on them, things like that. But it's a negative emotion that you dump on somebody else. So first thing people need to realize is we're all there to work as a team. We're not doing anything else. If you're working for a company, for example, you're all working towards one goal, to benefit the company so you can benefit from it, from keeping a job, from getting your bonuses, whatever it might be. If people actually start realizing that, I understand you want to build your career, you want to move forward, but there's a positive way of doing it. I don't think bullying and every other means would actually work. Eventually it boils down. Somebody will you know, be hurt and they will move on probably to HR, likes of Karen, sorry Karen. But it will come to light. There's no hiding those things. It will eventually come to light. It's a known fact that it exists still in the company in various shapes, sizes and forms, but be it men or women have to come forward to be able to talk about it, to be able to reach professionals like Karen to talk about it, to find a solution for it. If it's not a straightforward solution, then they work with it. I think it's important for everybody to realize that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, go ahead, Karen.
I was going to say, I think Michelle Obama says it well. When they go low, we go high, right? So as long as you can block out the noise, know what's your goal in working with this person, what do they want, and just try to focus on that. If they go on tangents, if they, you know, start bullying, it's not easy to do, but you just have to filter that out and let it be noise. Because if you feed into it, then you know, then you're going to be part of it. And then if it gets to that point where an unfortunate point where you do feel like you need to make a case to HR, you can show that you remained professional and, you know, you led with respect and kindness, and, you know, it's only going to reflect on them.
That's fantastic. I want to congratulate you on your imminent motherhood. I had no idea when I asked you to participate. So massive congratulations, belated happy birthday, Micky. And thank you so much, Valli and Angela, for having joined us. But I have to say special thanks to the ladies in Isle of Man for reaching and being super efficient in putting this together with me. It's been a real pleasure to work as a team. And thank you to our sponsors and everybody else who's participated today. I'm going to hand over to Katie Nicholson and say my goodbyes.
Thanks very much, Denise. I'd just like to say thank you on behalf of Startup Grind, Isle of Man and Gibraltar to Derek and our wonderful panelists, Valli, Angela, Karen and Micky. We're very grateful for you all giving up your time this evening and helping to lead the conversation and also share your perspectives with us. So thank you again. Thank you also to Google for Startups and Silicon Valley Bank for their support of SGWomen's Month, and also more locally to Continent 8 Technologies, Abacus Gibraltar and Gibraltar Finance, who are giving us invaluable support across both the Isle of Man and Gibraltar. Both chapters are very grateful for that. For anyone that's interested, with over 600 chapters globally, there are plenty of more virtual events taking place, not only across June, but going up into the rest of the year. So please check out startupgrind.com and join us whenever you can. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
If you've been online recently, you may have seen our pension adverts once or twice. But did you know that Abacus offers so much more than pensions? We have over 40 years experience, and with over 10 accountants we can provide accounting, payroll and tax planning services. We also have dedicated teams with professionals in company formation, trust and estate planning, funds and family office services. Visit our website at www.abacus.gi to find out more.
Thank you for joining us. The purpose of my talk this morning is really just to give a context to what we're doing and what Think Business, Think Gibraltar really is all about.
It is part of Gibraltar's growing international appeal that we welcome people travelling from so many places across the globe to share in our events.
But I began my remarks today by noting how significant the Gibraltarian insurance market is to the ABI, but more importantly to consumers in the UK. And we remain fully supportive of this market and of the choice that it gives UK customers.
So in the context of private clients, when they're looking at a jurisdiction that is reliable, stable, safe, we think we tick those boxes quite well.
Excited about it, and I think now is the time really for managers to start really looking at other alternatives other than just looking at the traditional, is it Luxembourg, is it Ireland in a post-Brexit world? I think now will be, what about Gibraltar?